number in the box, -1. Write down our coefficients. Drop there. Drop the 1. Anytime you use the number in a box, you always multiply, right? -1 times 1 is -1. When you go down, you always add, multiply, add, multiply. There. So, is that a factor?
Yes.
Yes, because your remainder is 0. That's actually the exact same problem you did yesterday. If you have yesterday's warm-up, you don't have to get it out. But that was the exact same problem yesterday. All I did yesterday was I just said, divide that by that. Same problem. We just changed what the question was. Instead of saying just divide, it was a question of is it a factor? But it's basically the same kind of thing. And then the second one, 2 goes in the box. 1, 3, -10. We drop the 1, 2, add, 5, 10, 0. So is it a factor? It's a 0. Yes. It is also a factor. Yes?
Do you need a 0 in the
So, yes. Because, so what she's saying is because we don't have a plus some number, technically we should put one more 0 there. If you do, it would just be 0 and 0, and so you'd end up with the same, you get the same answer. So in this case, you were okay if you did. Now, what we want to look at today is that kind of thing right there. And we're going to look at factoring that type of polynomial. Now, this is going to be based on the factoring that we've already done. So if we already understand factoring, this is one little step forward with factoring. Okay, so let's go ahead and grab our notes from yesterday. Let's see here. All right, so first off, we have x squared minus x minus 12. This is one I want you to do that one, factor that. This is something we already should know how to do. Let's factor that, right? Take the two numbers that multiply to give us -12. Add to give us -1. And factor. Negative. So it's going to be 3. This reminds me of Maddie. Both of you still make a test before, check report, way back, before Thanksgiving, week before that, right? It's a lot of factorings on there. So I was intentionally waiting till we do this before we kind of even think about doing it, just because this is going to review a lot of what's on there. Right? So this is a kind of good practice to get back to that. So we're doing this, so we'll come back to that. All right. So we get 3 and -4. So that means we get +3 x minus 4. Right? We're just factoring today. There's no equal sign. You're not having to do anything else. Okay. All right. Now, let's look at number 1. What we want to look at today. This is a little different. We now have a cubic polynomial that we want to factor. So it doesn't work the same though. But what we're going to do on all of these is the first step is going to be the same. We're going to factor out a common factor to make it look like this, then we can factor it the way we already know how. So, if we have x cubed minus x squared minus 12x, what would be the common factor for all of those? It would be x. So we're going to factor out an x out of each one of those, each term. And what it means to factor it out is just divide by x. So if I have x cubed and I divide out an x, what am I left with? X squared. X squared. If I have an x squared and I divide out an x, I have just x. If I have 12x and I divide out an x, I'm left with just 12. Now, once we get to there, you see this is basically the same one we just did up top. Once we get to there, we've divided out an x. And now we take this part and we do the same thing from up there. And so our answer will be x times x plus 3, x minus 4. Notice this is an x cubed, so we now have 3 factors. Let's go here. Number 2. What would be, let's look at just the p first. What would be the common factor for p to the 7th and p to the 5th? You can take out p, but you can take out a p to the 5th, okay? And then that's going to be p squared, and then there'll be nothing left over there. What number is like, what's the common factor of 9 and 36? I heard somebody say, you're thinking 4, right? So you're thinking right, but what we're going to actually take out is 9, but what you're thinking is 36 divided by 9 is 4, right? So what that means is, when you take out the 9, there's just a 1 there, and there's a 4 there. So it's not 4, you're thinking the right thing, we just got to make sure we write it down. Now, how do we factor this? If we think of this as p squared, what's the middle term? It's not there, so that means it's 0. So what are two numbers that multiply to give you -4 and add to give you 0? Two numbers that multiply to give you -4, -2 and 2. So it's going to be -2 and 2. That means that this factors into, we have 9p to the 5th, and this is p minus 2 and p plus 1. So every single one of these is going to work that same way. You're going to factor out a common factor. And then once you factor out a common factor, you're going to be left with something that is a quadratic, a square. That you can then go two numbers that multiply to give you this, add to give you that, and then you can figure out your answers like that. Okay. Let's try one more. 3. First off, deal with the n, deal with the variables. And here we're going to take out n to the 4th. Here's a shortcut trick that you can help as you do this. Remember, your last thing here always has to just be a number. So you basically have to divide out whatever's right there, right? So that this is just a number. And then you got to decide 3, 33, 72. What number can you take out of those 3? What's the common number? 3. So then you got to go through and figure out what's left. 3 n to the 6. I divide it out 3 into the 4th, and I just get square. If you take 3 out of 33, 11. And 3 out of 72, You need a calculator, grab a calculator, and the answer is 24. So now you're looking for two numbers that multiply to give you a positive 24 and add to give you negative 11. And that's going to be 3, negative 8. So now we come back down here. So from what we've already done, and from the two of you I mentioned, from what we did on the last test, it was a lot of factoring. We're just doing the same kind of thing. What's our new step now? We got to pull out this common factor part with the n. And once you do that, you can then just factor. Try number 4. See if you All right, the hard ones, the last two. These are the hardest two. So, the last one here. Notice, can you take a number out of all of them? 2, 7, 15. Is there a common factor with the numbers? No. So we can't do a number. All we can take out is a w squared. So, do we remember how to factor something when there's a number in front of the square? So what do? You multiply those two together, right? So we want two numbers that multiply to give us negative 30 and add to give us negative 7. Start with the multiply. What two numbers multiply to give you 30? 6 and 5. Those don't add to give us 7. How about 10 and 3? So 10 and 3. It's negative 7. It's negative 10. Now I'm going to write over here before I go back over there. The way we did this is we have 2w plus 3, 2w minus 5. Sorry. Minus 10. Now, we got to factor out our common factor, which is 2. So then this gives me 2w plus 3, w minus 5. Right, that is, and then those two. The 30 comes from the 2 and the 15 to get the 30. The first, the AC. All right. Can we do one more example, or we think we got it? This is just a matter, this is so much of what we've done previously, right? It's a good review of factoring, especially for some of you that still need to work on that. But it kind of that same idea to take out the common factor and then do what we've already done. Okay. All right. Homework. You already have your homework. That was from yesterday. The first 6 problems. Did the last 3 yesterday. So this homework will be due on Monday. But you have about 10 minutes here. You can probably get a lot of that, if not most of it, done here today, as you work on it, and we'll move on to the next thing tomorrow.